everyone. I hope you all are doing great. My name is Anjali, and today we are going to be discussing some interview questions on Node.js. In this video, we are going to be covering the three different types of questions here, right away starting from your basic level, your intermediate level, and the advanced level. And this session is going to be super interesting. So let's get started. So the first question here we have is, how is Node.js better than any other frameworks most popularly used? So before answering this, I'm going to be explaining you what Node.js is, and based upon that, I'm going to be answering this question. So, before doing anything, we should always be knowing what is that. So, what is Node.js? How does it work? I'm going to give you a quick overview across it, and then we are going to be moving towards our question. So, when we talk about Node.js, so what is Node.js? This is nothing but a virtual machine. Now, since I am saying this is a virtual machine, so the next question which you guys can have is, what this virtual machine is actually going to be doing. Now, if you can see here, we are using .js. So you guys must be already aware that we save JavaScript files with the .js extension. Now, this virtual machine is actually going to be using JavaScript as its scripting language, and later on we are going to be running it, and whenever we will have to run, so where we are going to be running, we are going to be running it on your Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. So that is where your Node.js is actually going to be running. Okay, so when we talk about Node.js, so what is Node.js? So basically it is based upon a event driven architecture. Now, when we talk about event driven architecture, what do we mean by that? So in this particular case, we are going to be having some input output, and those input outputs are going to be running asynchronously. And because of this asynchronous input output architecture, what we are actually going to be getting, we are going to be getting a light weighted and efficient application. So if you guys must have seen, these days Node.js is popularly used, and because of its lightweight and efficient nature, we are using it. Okay, so when we talk about Node.js, so we are going to be using it in developing desktop applications as well as with some popular frameworks which are actually called as electrons, and those ones we are going to be using because it is going to be providing you certain APIs, and with the help of those APIs you can access some OS level features such as file system, networks, and so on. Okay, now I'm going to be telling you how Node.js is better than any other framework. So when we talk about Node.js, so this one is actually quite simple to use. Also, it is quite simple in the development process as well. And why it is quite simple? That is because just now I have mentioned about some input output, right? Those ones, like I said, those are asynchronous. So what does it mean? It means this one is actually going to be providing you some non-blocking input output. And here you are also we are using some event based model. So that one is going to be helping you in generating some short response time and concurrent processing. And if you talk about any other frameworks, right, just like those frameworks, here also you will have the option of using thread management. Also, when you talk about Node.js, here we are going to be running it on your Chrome V8 engine, which is actually written in C++, and this one is highly performant with your constant improvement. Also, when we talk about the JavaScript, right, so JavaScript is something which you can use in the front end as well as in the back end development, and because of JavaScript, the overall development process will be quite faster. So when we talk about Node.js, we have already spoken about the benefits of using Node.js. What is the another one? So lastly, the important point about the Node.js is that here we are having lots of libraries, and with the help of libraries, what do we have to do? Of course, those libraries are going to make your work simpler. So you do not have to write down everything from the scratch, Based upon those libraries, you can actually use a lot of functions that is going to be making your work simpler. Now let's move to your next question. Now the next question we have is, what are some commonly used timing features of Node.js? So when we talk about Node.js in this, in order to use the timing option, we have multiple options available, and we are going to be discussing all of them one by one. So the first one which we have is set timeout or clear timeout. Now, why do we use these two? So basically, whenever you are having certain code and in that you want some delay, like let us say you are executing something like let's say you must have seen timeout option in while doing a lot of things on the websites, in the banking websites and all, they will have some timeout option. After that they will say you are not active, we are logging you out, and sometimes they do it on their own. So how do they perform those operations? That can be done with the help of set timeout or clear timeout. So basically these ones are going to be used to implement delays in code execution. Okay, now let's look into the next one. So the next which we have is set interval or your clear interval. Now when and where we are going to be using this? So when we are going to be having some code, and in that code we want to run some set of lines multiple times. So in such case, this is something which is going to be quite helpful. So basically it is like you are having some iteration. So this one you can use to run a block of code multiple times. Okay, now let's look into the next one. So the next option which we have is set immediate or clear immediate. Now you must already be knowing the English meaning of the word immediate, right? So based upon this, these functions are also going to be working, and how it is actually going to be helpful. So you are going to be having some function. So for any function, if you are passing that as set immediate, like for any function, if you are passing the set immediate function as the argument, so what it is actually going to be doing, this one is going to be acting as the callback. And that callback, since it is saying immediate, so when that is going to be executed, so that will be executed in the next iteration of the event loop. That is why we are calling it as immediate. Like the moment that iteration is completing, you have to start executing it. This one you actually have to pass as a parameter for a function. Okay, now the last one which we have here is process dot next tick. So when you are going to be using this, so when you talk about this set immediate or process dot next tick, so these two are actually going to be appearing to be doing the same thing. With the help of this also you can perform the same operation. However, you can actually prefer one over the another based upon the callback urgency. If you want any of these things before, then you can pick it up. Okay, so we can say same as set immediate. Okay, now let's look into your next question. Now the next question which we have here is, how many types of API functions are there in Node.js? So basically we have two types of functions. The first one is asynchronous, or you can also call it as non-blocking functions. And why you are going to be using it? So when we talk about some input output operation, so at that particular time we can actually say those are non-blocking operations, right? If one thing is happening, like let us say right now you are listening or you are watching, at that particular time the other like let us say you're watching this video, at the same time your hands are free, right? Because you're just watching. On the other side, if you are writing down something, at that particular time you cannot watch, because you cannot write and watch at the same time. Correct? So we can say when you talk about your input output operations, which can be forked out from the main loop, it means from the main loop we are creating a copy, and on the top of that we are creating input output operation. And why we are doing it in that manner? So that of course these copies are going to be shared across different people, so that no two people are working on the same set of thing. So that, like what actually happens, even if you talk about the merge thing, so whenever you are going to be merging it out, you may have some merge conflicts, and that will happen because if two people have made certain changes on the same file, then it will be giving you option of either accepting the incoming changes or accepting the outgoing changes or accepting both. So in that particular scenario you can make your choice. Now the second one which we have is synchronous blocking function. So these ones you are going to be using whenever you will have operations that influence the process of running, that is going to be having some of the process running in the main loop. So some of the times you are going to be having some main loop, and there you are going to be running multiple things, and that particular time this one is coming into the picture. Now let's see the next one. So the next one says, what is an event loop in Node.js? So if you will look into this particular diagram, so what you can see, at one place we have event emitter, correct? Let me draw it here for you so that we can understand. So one place you have event emitter. After that we have certain events here, and those ones are going to your event loops. Okay, so this is how your Node.js event loop is going to be there. Now whatever that is asynchronous, that is going to be managed by your event loop. And how you can do it? With the help of queue and listener. So basically what we are doing here, this one is going to be helpful for event handling. All right, now you can actually understand it better that whenever we will have any asynchronous function, so that will be executing your input output operations, and where those ones are going to get executed, that will be executed on your main thread. After that what will happen, your main thread is going to be like whatever your main thread is there, so that main thread sends it to a different thread, and that will be actually allowing your V8 to keep executing your main code, because whatever input output requests are coming, those ones also need to be actually merged to your main code, right? Now when you talk about this event loop, so what it will be doing, this one is actually going to be involving different phases, and all those phases are going to be involving some specific task, and what and all the tasks are going to be involved here. So it could be your timers, it could be your pending callbacks, it could be your ideal or prepare, it could be your poll, it could be check, it could be your close callbacks. And when you are going to be doing it, how you will be achieving? With the help of FIFO queues. Also, like when you talk about all these iterations of this execution, right, at that particular time this one is also going to be checking for the asynchronous input output or the timers. Also based upon that it will be shutting it down, so that the entire thing will remain clean, and if there are anything which is working in parallel, all of those things we can close it off. Now the next question which we have here is, differentiate between process.nextTick and set immediate. So just now I have mentioned that both of them can be used whenever you want to make some asynchronous callback, right? And how you can do it? By performing some listener functions. Now that is the similarity part. What is the difference between them? So let me just help you out with that. So when you talk about this process dot next tick, so what this one is actually going to be doing, so this one is going to be setting the callback to execute. Okay, so setting callback to execute. Now when you talk about set immediate, so what set immediate is going to be doing? So set immediate is going to be pushing the callback in the queue to be executed. Now if you will see how actually your event loop works, because in order to understand the difference between these two, you should be knowing the event loop. So in this, firstly you're going to be having some timers. Okay, after that it is going to be checking for some pending callbacks. After that it is going to be checking for some ideal prepare, like if something is already ideal or if you need to prepare certain things. After this you are going to be making a connection. So this one is actually going to be making connection to your polls, to your data, etc. After that you are just going to be checking and then close callback. So this is the event loop which we have. Okay, now when you talk about your process dot next tick, so what that one is going to be doing, that one is going to be adding the callback function. And where it will add? It will add to the start of the next event queue. So before all of this executes, like it is going to be executing your function which we are setting with the help of process dot next tick. And when you talk about set immediate, so what it will be doing, set immediate is actually going to be, firstly it is going to be going in the check phase, and after being there it is going to be waiting for the next event queue. So based upon this you can understand how the execution is going to be there. Now let's look into the next question. So the next question which we have is, how does Node.js overcome the problem of blocking of input-output operations? So, when you talk about Node, that one is having event loop which we have just now discussed. And why do we use event loop? Because that one is going to be responsible for handling all the input-output operations which are getting executed in the asynchronous manner without blocking the main function, right? Now I'll just explain this to you with the help of certain example. So like let us say you are having some network call. If that network call needs to happen, what it will do, it will be scheduled in the event loop instead of the main thread, that is your single thread, right? And let us say we have multiple such input output calls, then each one of them will be queued accordingly to be executed separately. That is going to be separate from your main thread. Okay, so even though we have a single threaded JavaScript, input output operations are handled in the non-blocking way. With the help of this, it must be clear to you that when we are talking about asynchronous, how we are actually saying that this one is going to be non-blocking. Okay. Now the next question is, what is Node.js streams? Okay, so I'm going to be explaining you what a Node.js stream is. Along with that, I'm also going to be explaining you the different types of Node.js streams. Okay. Now, when you talk about stream, so what is actually stream? Like, you must have heard about streaming YouTube video, correct? What does that mean? Something which is actually happening in a continuous manner, correct? Now, if something is happening in the continuous manner, what would actually be triggering that? So there could be something which we call as event emitter. Okay, so when you talk about streams, so streams are actually nothing but instances of event emitter. Now, what these event emitters are going to be doing? So these ones can be used to work with streaming data in Node.js. Okay. So you just need to understand we are going to be having streams and those are nothing but the instances of the event emitter. Now when you talk about your streams, so they can actually be used for handling and manipulating streaming large videos, and not just your large videos, also your music, which is your mp3. Okay, so this one is actually going to be helpful for your mp3 as well as your mp4. Both formats are actually going to be supported over your network. All right, now if some streaming is happening at that particular time, we are also going to be using something for the buffer, right? So they use buffers, and what those buffers are going to be doing, so that one is going to be acting as the temporary storage. In that temporary storage, we are going to be storing all our all your data, so that when you are going to be looking at it, it will be a seamless experience for you. Okay, now let's discuss what are the different types of streams. So the first one which we have is writable. Now what does it mean? Sometimes when you are talking about stream write, so that one is actually going to be those types to which your data can be written. Okay, so streams to which data can be written. Now where you are actually going to be writing your data, so you can write in something called as fs dot create write stream. So with the help of this function, you can go ahead and write your data. Now what is the next type which we have here? So that is readable. So when you talk about readable, what streams we are going to be using here? So some streams we use so that from those we can read some type of data. So from this data can be read. Okay, and how you are going to be performing this? For this we have something called as create read stream. Okay, now let's look into the next type. So the next type which we have is duplex. So when you talk about duplex, what does it mean? Just now we have discussed about writable and readable. So duplex, you must be knowing what it must be doing. It is going to be combination of both readable plus writable. Okay, and by this what you can do, of course you can perform both of the operations, and where you can actually like what type of stream it is going to be there. So when you will have something called as net.socket, so what this will be doing, this one is actually going to be performing both of the operations together. Okay, now let's look into the next stream. So the next one which we have is transform. So when you talk about transform, what it will be doing, of course when you talk about duplex, so what duplex can be doing, that can modify or transform the data as it is written and read. So what does it mean? If you want to modify, like of course there can be some data, and when you are reading or when you are writing, at that particular time what you are actually doing, modifying your data. So at that particular time your transform stream is going to be used. Now what is the example for the same? Something like z library dot create deflate. All right, so I hope streams must be clear to you. Now we will look into our next question. describe the exit codes of Node.js. So, we have something called as exit codes. So firstly, I'm going to be telling you what exit code is, and based upon that, we are going to be discussing the various exit codes available. So, as the name is saying exit, what does it mean? We are going to be leaving, right? So when you talk about a process, so when a process leaves, what does it mean? It means the process will get terminating. So when you talk about exit codes, you must have seen, like, like I'm giving you some example. If you are opening a web browser, I think some 404 error is there. After looking at that, you understand, okay, what the issue is going to be there. So what it is doing, it is actually providing you some of the codes, and those codes are going to be giving us the idea that if a process has terminated, so what is the reason behind the termination. Okay, so when you talk about exit codes, so this one is going to be giving us idea of how a process got terminated. What is the reason behind termination? Okay, now let me give you some of the examples. So the first one which we have here is uncaught fatal exception. So this one has a code number 1. So what does it mean? Like, what is this exit code? This means there has been an exception which we have not handled. That is why it is saying uncaught. Okay, so we can say there has been an exception that is not handled. Okay, now what is the next one which we have? So the second one which we have is unused, and this has a code number 2 associated. So as the name is saying unused, it means you are not using it. But if we are not using, then where that is actually going? So that is actually going to be referring to that which is going to be reserved by bash, because it is reserved. We are not making use of it. Now let's discuss the next one, that is fatal error. And for this we have given a code number 5. Okay, so when you talk about fatal, what does it mean? It means there has been an error in V8. Okay, and that error is actually coming from your standard error output. So you must be knowing we have stdin, that means standard input. Then we have std out, that means standard output. Similarly, we have standard error. This one we will be using, and you can actually use it on your consoles, and whatever the message you are going to be printing with the help of this, that one is going to be coming in the red color. Okay, now let's look into the next one. So that is your internal exception handler runtime failure, and for this we have an associated code number 7. Now what is this one? So there has been an exception when bootstrapping function was called. So you must be knowing about the bootstrapping function, right? That one is actually going to be applying your bootstrapping properties. So at the time of calling this one, there can be one error, and this one is going to be representing that. Now let's look into our last one. So the last which we have here is internal JavaScript evaluation failure. And for this, we have a code number 4. So when this exception is actually going to be coming, when there will be exception when, when you talk about the bootstrapping. So that one you are actually trying to process, but that one got failed. And when it is actually going to be causing the problem, like, you are having a function, and from that function you are expecting a return value. If that value is not going to be returned at that particular time, this exception is actually going to be coming. Okay. So thank you everyone for attending this session. I hope you must have gotten benefited. I have tried to cover all the 3 categories of the interview questions on Node.js, right away starting from your basic level, intermediate level, and the advanced level. If you have found this video helpful, do share it with your friends. And also, if you have any questions or anything, please comment it down below, and please subscribe to Talent 500 YouTube channel, and I will be meeting you in the next video. Till then, happy learning. Bye bye guys.